me to take this, or are you just holding it?
No, don't take it,
Okay.
please, thanks. I had one. Thank you. Okay, committee, we have a hearing today on SB 36. Again, as we talked last week, you have received the minutes from January 23rd, 27th, 28th, 30th, February 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 10th. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Representative Neely.
I move that we approve the minutes.
There a second? Seconded by Roth. We'll get you in there, Seibert. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Post same sign. Motion carries. The minutes from January 23rd, 27th, 28th, 30th, February 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 10th are approved. Let's open the hearing on Senate Bill 36. This is increasing the cap amounts of money dispersed by the Division of Conservation and so on to conservation districts. We'll call on Mr. Hamilton for a bill brief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I think the topic of conservation districts has come up this session in this committee, but just some quick background that currently we have 105 conservation districts across the state, one in each county. The original law, from what I understand, was passed as sort of a response to the Dust Bowl for the purpose of addressing improper land use practices that cause and contribute to the serious erosion of farm and grazing lands within the state. And so currently, each of the districts, there's a county funding component, and there's also state funding component. And so this bill is making amendments that just touch on the state portion of their funding. And so under current law, on or before September 1st of each year, each conservation district submits to the Division of Conservation that's in the Department of Ag a certification of the amount of monies the district will receive from the county for the next year. The division then includes a line item in its regular budget request for an amount equal to the sum of the allocations of each county to each district, not to exceed $25,000 per district. And then after July 1st of the following year, the division disperses that appropriated money to each district on a one-to-one matching basis with the county funding, or if appropriations are insufficient, on a prorated basis. And so Senate Bill 36, again, it amends the state funding requirements for the conservation districts. First, the deadline for districts to submit certification of county funding would be changed from September 1st to November 1st of each calendar year. Second, the $25,000 per district appropriation limit would be increased to $50,000 subject to appropriations. And then lastly, such state appropriations would now be dispersed to each district on a 2-to-1 matching basis, not to exceed $50,000 per district. Senate Bill 36 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Any questions for Kyle? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is it correct then, looking through this fiscal note, that there's no money coming out of the SGF to fund this?
My apologies. I have not had a chance to review the fiscal note that came out of the governor's budget office.
Well, we'll get that in just a moment. So any other questions? Saying none, thank you. So now, Heather, if you would give us the fiscal rundown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Department of Agriculture estimates enactment of the bill could increase state aid to conservation districts. The KDA indicates the fiscal year 2025 appropriation from the State Water Plan Fund totaling $3.5 million provided an average of $33,359 per disbursement to each district. These disbursements to conservation districts occurred on July 10th, 2024, the beginning of FY 2025. For fiscal year 2026, the governor recommends a $4.3 million appropriation from the State Water Plan Fund and a $1 million transfer from the 2024 House Bill 2302 Projects Fund in the Kansas Water Office for state aid to conservation districts. The Kansas Association of Counties indicates enactment of the bill could increase counties' allocations to conservation districts to meet the new match amount. However, a fiscal effect cannot be estimated.
Okay, questions, and maybe our conferee can maybe do a little better explanation so we fully understand, because I believe this is a kind of a state-county partnership. And so, any other questions for Heather? Seeing none, we will get underway with testimony. And we have first Dan Meyerhoff as a proponent from the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to submit testimony in support of Senate Bill 36 on behalf of the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts. My name is Dan Meyerhoff. I am the executive director for the association. As was mentioned, there are 105 conservation districts in Kansas, one in every county, and there is a 5-member volunteer board elected by residents of that county. And that board provides leadership for each one of those local conservation districts, directing local natural resource priorities, identifying those at the local level. And when we talk about funding, this bill, House Bill 36, amends the funding formula. It does not provide any funding for conservation districts. That's made through the normal budgetary process here in the legislature. What this does is it changes the match, the county-state match, from 1-to-1 to a 2-to-1 match, with no more than $50,000 per county, which we put a cap on that. This issue did pass the House last year in the form of HB 2800, 120-3. It made it to the Senate late in the process. We ended up with a proviso being passed last year, and that language has been in effect since July 1. We're hoping to make this permanent this year. The bill was introduced in the Senate, passed the Senate 2 weeks ago, 39-0, and now it is here in your committee. So for those of you that are not familiar with conservation districts, whether you're in a rural county or an urban county, residents of those counties, if they have a natural resource issue, they go into their local conservation district office, most of the time located in a USDA service center, but not always. There are some conservation districts, 10 across the state, that have standalone offices. But you go in there, the conservation district manager can help you understand, what are the different priorities or options that are out there, what are the programs that are out there. They'll listen to you, find out what your concerns are, because we're wanting to address your concerns, not our concerns that we think you have. And then steer you to the right place for that assistance, whether it be a conservation district employee, whether it be an NRCS employee, or one of the other partners that we work for. The conservation district really works as a clearinghouse for helping folks find the need that they, or the help that they need to address their natural resource issues. At the state level, the conservation districts are the primary delivery system for conservation programs administered by the Division of Conservation. We're the primary delivery system for the Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative, and we work with KDHE on implementing RAPS projects across the state as well. Along with that, we also work closely with our federal partners, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, providing administrative support to their offices, as well as some technical support. For example, last year, we assisted them with administering 837 EQIP contracts, which totaled a little over $64 million, and also 210 CSP contracts, Conservation Stewardship Program contracts, for an additional $29 million. So I have a lot of impact at the local and the state level, working with our federal partners as well. We also do a lot of education outreach. We reach thousands of elementary and high school age students across the state, from Garden City out in southwest Kansas and Colby. A lot of our conservation districts hold single county events. In the east, we have several programs in the Kansas City Overland Park area with the Johnson County Conservation District, Miami County Conservation District, reaching those kids and helping them understand the natural resource issues that do affect them in their community, whether it be a rural or an urban setting. So with that, back to SB 36. Conservation districts are subdivisions of state government. but they are located in each county. Their base funding comes from the county conservation district. Under the current law that is in place, state will match a dollar for dollar up to $25,000 for district funding. That was put into place, I think, 17 or 18 years ago. The tough thing is we've seen a tremendous amount of increase in costs and operations over the last 17, 18 years. It's a struggle for us to keep staff in place, experienced staff in place, because we can't pay a competitive salary, can't provide benefits for that district staff. And so through some conversations with legislators and so on over the last year and a half, we came up with this idea of increasing the cost or the match from 2 to 1, but still putting a cap on it at $50,000 to limit exposure to the state to address, the need we have for increasing funding for conservation districts. With this bill, it will provide a more stable workforce so that we can, provide better quality assistance, administrative and technical assistance to our local farmers and ranchers. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with the committee, and I stand to answer questions.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Any questions on this? Representative Blex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dan, for being here. This has been a passion of mine for a long time. I was county chair in Montgomery County for 6 years, and it is a 5-member board of supervisors that we would meet at least monthly, approve bills, and we were elected locally by local constituents, both rural and urban, and it was a really grassroots experience, and it was like most boards. It was a no thank you job in some ways, but the rewards were great in the fact that we could do something for conservation. And some of the things that the conservation districts do, a lot of times they'll buy a specialized piece of equipment, for example, a no-till drill to seed native grass, that the average producer couldn't afford and would only use once or maybe twice. And we would rent that out, make it available, have a rental agreement, and they would bring it in, and it just worked really well within the boundaries of that county. So there's a lot of services out there that you kind of, particularly if you're from an urban area, you don't really realize the benefits of what a conservation district does. And we were, as a district, and as those 5 supervisors, we sometimes were the only voice for conservation in that county. If we did not speak up for things that was important, like terraces, waterways, pond watering devices below, fencing out a pond to reduce phosphorus runoff, and a good example, I've got almost all of my ponds fenced out except one. And they have watering tanks below. And what my cattle have is good, clean water. You don't drink the water you take a bath in. And a cow is about the same way. They do a lot better with clean water. And this year I had one I didn't get fenced out and had a calf that was about 6 weeks old, which is past the critical point, break the ice, fall in and drown. Now, at 400 pounds, that's about a $1,500 loss for me. And so my partnership, and a lot of times it cost about $6,000 to fence out a third of an acre pond. And so that's a little more than what sometimes some producers can't produce. So this partnership is very critical, and the programs are very critical. Had I been proactive, and I was waiting to do some work on the dam, which I did luckily last Sunday before this rain down there. So it is important, and it is a benefit that both saves the money, and then when I send water out of a fenced pond down to Coffeyville, Kansas, and they suck it out of their water treatment plant, that water is not loaded with phosphorus like it would be if the cows were in there doing their business in the pond. So it is a good deal, a lot of really good benefits, and I really am 100% appreciate what we need. We've been long underfunded. In the 6 years I was there, I went through 3 district managers. The turnover was just terrible simply because we couldn't compete with the pay or the benefits. And I think this will really add a lot of continuity to the offices. We certainly are requiring in our picture of the bill, requiring them even to do a little water testing and more additional. And the potential is there in 2302. We actually put in the bill that would allow 2 or more counties to get together and actually apply for grants that would maybe county-wide. And Dan and I were just talking, had we had that in place, I wish state government had some mechanism for storing funds, because if we'd had 2 or 3 counties get together and do a cost share clean out on ponds, like Oklahoma Conservation Commission did, which they cost shared 80%, we'd had that in place for drought. When we had it 2 or 3 years ago, we could have really been beneficial. So I could go on for this or that. I appreciate the bill. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm 110% behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't sure exactly where you were heading, so no. Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to address Representative Fairchild's question a little bit earlier. And for members that weren't on the Ag Committee or Water Committee 2 years ago, 2302, there was money set aside for lots of other projects, and I watched the conservation bill or what has been proposed here in Senate Bill 36 come through our committee in the chamber last year and be passed, and then it didn't go any farther. Back in November, I started working on a water bill, and Revisor Hamilton can tell you we started sometime in November. Our RS number was 0021. I did not know this bill was going to come up at that time. I did put in for $5 million, and in committee we dropped that to $2.5 million, which would easily do the 2-to-1 match. The difference between our 2113 bill that was passed through Water Committee and across the House floor here a week and a half ago, that bill sunsets in July 1 of 2028. It was a 3-year bill in sunset to match the same sunset as the 2302 bill. It was a 5-year bill done in 23. The purpose behind putting the $2.5 million toward the 2-to-1 match for conservation districts, in my mind, was that they could provide water quality sampling within communities and report the results of that in somewhat of an aggregate manner so that it was not identifiable to an individual piece of property. I don't want to violate privacy rights, but I wanted the conservation or Kansas Geological Survey to have those samples that could be placed on their water quality database. Currently, they have 160 points. I think if we could do this, we could throw another 1,000 small domestic wells onto that database and really improve the record keeping and the modeling that we could bring from that. This bill goes on in perpetuity and provides for that 2-to-1 match. So if this bill goes forward, somewhere in the near future, we're going to have to reconcile between those 2 bills. The one I proposed that sunsets in 28 and this one that goes on in perpetuity. And personally, I'm a fan of in perpetuity, but I would still ask that they report the water quality things to the Geological Survey, because I think that's an important tool that we can use out there. So I'm trying to explain, Representative Fairchild, where we're at on those 2 things.
Okay, Representative Slingen-Siepen.
Could I ask Representative Blacks a question? So I understand the fencing in of the ponds. When you said, when I send water down to Coffeyville, how do you send it there? You're letting it go into a creek past your dam and on downriver or stream, or are you piping it down there, or are you hauling it? I mean,
Well, God's in charge of that. He hadn't been doing a good job the last 2 or 3 years because the ponds have been very dry.
Right.
But normally in southeast Kansas, excuse me, we get around 40, 42 inches of rainfall annually. So what we have is most of the ponds have either an emergency spillway or a pipe through them that once we get
kind of an
full,
overflow.
they
right?
will run around, and in that water, in my case, it goes into Spring Creek, then into Onion Creek, and into the Verdigris system where Coffeyville picks it up.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, other questions for Dan? Any other comments and your thoughts of conservation? We could all get our crayons out and we could do a poster on conservation if
You know
you'd
what,
like.
we can host a poster contest for you.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
All right. So again, so that this 2-to-1, 2 for the county, 1 for the state, correct? It goes into the operations of the conservation districts.
Say that again?
2-to-1
So
for the
otherwise,
state. Yeah, the state
for-
2-to-1,
right.
right.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Said that wrong. Yes. But what that will do though is to hopefully bring some stability to some of our county offices.
You know, and I will add that just last year with the proviso, it significantly increased county funding of conservation districts, which helped with that match. So it's a significant benefit.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. We also have written-only proposal from the Department of Agriculture as well as Justice Cobb for the Nature Conservancy. Anyone else wishing to testify in proponents? Seeing none, anyone wishing to testify as an opponent? Seeing none, all those wishing to testify as a neutral on Senate Bill 36? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 36. Okay, no meeting scheduled for tomorrow, but we will have a hearing on Thursday, and that'll be Senate Bill 89. So this bill and Senate Bill 89 are the two that came over from the Senate. But we will have action on House Bill 2012. That is the higher blend of ethanol tax credit / grant program. So if you do have ideas, if you do have amendments, please talk to Mr. Hamilton and get those lined up. Anything else for the good of the cause? Representative Slingensiepen.
Who sent the cookies around?
Representative Rozier.
They were good. You've got a good track record. Thank you.
All right.
And the sorghum products were good too. Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
Chair Minix brought the sorghum flour to me. So they are sourdough, but they are also sorghum flour. So they are gluten-free and they are gut healthy, but also I made the butter from scratch. So there's a lot in there.
I want to, I want to remind the committee you are on this for another year, and so I assume next year and next year Tuesdays. I gotta get this. Yes. Any other announcements for the go to the cause? Again, no meeting tomorrow. We will have a hearing on Senate Bill 89 and be working House Bill 2012. That being said, this is the shortest meeting so far of the year. We are done before 4, starting almost on time. We are adjourned.